When discussing the Anglican tradition, I think a lot of people are bothered by the fact that it seems like Anglicans have a hard time defining what it means to be an Anglican. They look in, they're curious, they love the worship, it looks beautiful, and they say, okay, what does it mean to be an Anglican? What do you believe? And you're met with a variety of responses. And when you look at the state of the Anglican communion as a whole, with the infectious liberalism that has just entered into the church and the tradition, it can be very jarring. And so, especially when you have traditions like Presbyterianism and Lutheranism and even Rome and Orthodoxy that seem so sure of what they believe and can present you with documentation of exactly what it is that they believe. You know, you go to a Presbyterian and say, what do you believe? They'll point to the Westminster Confession and everything's laid out super neatly. You go to the Anglicans, you say, what do you believe? You'll get anything from read the 39 Articles to we hold to the creeds and the 7 ecumenical councils and the articles. Well, they were a part of our history, but they're not that relevant anymore. And so much more. It's no wonder that our tradition is oftentimes seen as a compromised tradition. One that has fallen away from grace and one that was set up to fail with its lack of clarity. However, I would like to make the case, especially to those who are inquiring into the Anglican tradition, to say that this is false. This is not a good way of viewing the tradition. And the first thing that I want to point out, and the first kind of point of clarity that I would like to attempt to bring to this situation, is to simply say that a lot of times when people look at the kind of secularization that has taken over various parts of the Anglican tradition, I'm thinking here of the Episcopal Church and the Church of England, they can see that as indicative of an actual defect in the actual tradition of Anglicanism. However, I think this is misguided. The secularization that has infiltrated parts of the Anglican Church are actually a departure from the tradition as such, and an infection that comes through post-Enlightenment thinking and modernity, really. At the end of the day, it is modernity entering into the church. And so I think people are misguided to see this apostasy that has taken place and to assume that it means that there's something wrong with the tradition. Because if you look, and I can guarantee you this, name any tradition, any one, doesn't matter if it's Rome, Orthodoxy, Presbyterianism, Baptists, Lutherans, wherever, all of them, perhaps in different ways, but all of them are in a battle against secular thinking and ideology. And every single one of them has problems with people trying to sneak abhorrent and innovations into church teaching. All of them. And so Anglicans are not the only ones who have succumbed in certain parts to this sinful and egregious thinking. However, the point I'm trying to make here is simply to say that this is not indicative of a problem with Anglicanism as such. It is a problem with human nature and sin entering into the church with a disregard for what the church actually teaches. So with that out of the way, I want to address now the idea of Anglican identity. What does it mean to be an Anglican? And I want to answer this question a little bit differently because I feel as though sometimes people can watch a video or read an article that says, what does it mean to be an Anglican? And they can leave being more frustrated than when they started. And this was true for me in many points in my life and in my journey into Anglicanism. Because you can read an article that says, okay, you've been wondering what Anglicanism is, here's what it is. It's commitment to the Book of Common Prayer, the 39 Articles, and the books of homilies, okay? And somebody can say, great, now I know what Anglicans are. And then they go and they read something else, or they watch another video, and somebody says, you know, Anglicanism is really about a commitment to the Apostolic Church, especially the creeds and the 7 ecumenical councils. And when it comes to the 39 Articles and the books of homilies, these were really parts of the English Reformation, but they're not that important today. And then go, wait a second, this guy's saying something completely different than the guy over here. Which is it? And as you continue to kind of go down the rabbit trail, it becomes more and more frustrating because you realize that everybody's saying something slightly different. Everybody's emphasizing different points of the tradition, and it doesn't seem like there really is a coherent center. It's either a watered-down Catholicism that's being taught or some kind of soft Protestantism. So I can understand why somebody would look at that kind of a situation, feel a sense of just unease, and then see the Lutherans with the Book of Concord or Roman Catholicism with the Magisterium and be like, there, something that is more neatly defined, something that I can point to, and I can say, that's what we believe. There's a certain stability that comes with that doesn't seem to exist within the Anglican Church. However, bearing that in mind, I would like to make a case that I think many people miss Anglican identity and truly what defines Anglican identity because they're approaching it incorrectly. I think in a post-Enlightenment world, we have idolized the intellect, and we have idolized the idea of knowledge and having every little detail and question answered. And so the way in which we pursue truth has moved from a more embodied incarnational experience into a more heady, intellectualized experience. And so what I mean by that is I think people, when they ask a question like, what is the Anglican tradition? They are already conceiving in their minds that it's going to be something that is laid out for them intellectually. We believe this, and this, okay? And I would say that Anglicans, in keeping with the historic Catholic faith, are not so much about emphasizing we believe this, and this, but in emphasizing that if you want to know what Anglicans believe, come worship with us. Anglicanism is an experiential tradition. It's something that you learn intellectually through the embodied participation. And I don't think that you can really grasp the depth, the beauty, or the unity of the Anglican tradition without participation, without understanding that the tradition is intentionally meant to be approached this way. And so when you involve yourself in the actual worship of the church within the Anglican context, which means participating weekly in Holy Communion, if not more than once a week, at the very least on the Lord's Day. It also means participating in the daily offices, praying morning and evening prayer. And of course, it also means participating in your own private devotion as well. And this is laid out very well in a short read by Greg Peters in his book Anglican Spirituality, where he talks about these three things as being essentially what it means to be an Anglican. If you want to be an Anglican, it's not about learning and knowing and intellectualizing all these particular documents and dogmas. It's about worshiping, Holy Communion, daily office, private devotion. And these three things, when it's done within the context of the Book of Common Prayer, which is the text of the Anglicans, an English spirituality will emerge. You will be shaped in it. There will be real formation that takes place. And you will be able to see and behold what it means to be an Anglican. And I think when we approach the tradition of Anglicanism this way, its beauty and its depth emerge in a way that cannot happen if we stay kind of in the intellectualized version of the tradition, pointing to different dogmatic definitions as trying to find a cohesive center. It's easy to read from the 16th century, we'll say through the 20th century, various Anglican divines, and to come away going, man, they disagree on a lot of things. But when you actually look at how they worshipped, you will see that what bound them together in the same tradition was actually very, very remarkably similar, regardless of churchmanship. Cranmer is not E.L. Maskell, okay? Lancelot Andrewes is not Edward Pusey. However, what bound them together was the way in which they worshipped. Holy Communion, daily offices, private devotion. And in these three things, they had the same phronema, the same mind. And I would say this is the mind of the Apostolic Church. When you go back and you read, let's say, the first 4 centuries of church history, you are not going to find the church fathers as this united whole that agreed and saw everything exactly the same. In fact, what you're going to see is very similar to what you see reading Anglican divines from the 16th century to the 20th century. You're going to see disagreements on little details, on ceremony, on theology, on how this doctrine's articulated, how this particular thing is understood. And yet, nobody reads the fathers of the first 4 centuries of the church and thinks these guys do not share the same faith. These guys are not part of the same church. No. Why? Because the way in which they worshipped was unified. They had a united worship and pattern of spirituality. And theology for them was incarnational. It was participatory. It was something you enter into, not something you purely intellectualize. In fact, the intellect only matures through the patterns of daily worship. And I think some people want to intellectualize the faith in order that they might better understand the daily patterns of worship, but it doesn't work that way. You want to be a mature Christian, you participate in the worship of the church. And the more that you do that, the more your knowledge and understanding is going to grow. And so I think if we as Christians are going to have a meaningful answer to the question, what is Anglican identity? We have to say, come and see. We have to say, come and worship with us. Come and pray the daily office with us. And as you participate in these patterns, in the church calendar, the pattern of Advent and then Lent and Eastertide and Pentecost and all of these wonderful things and the saints' days and the feast days, as you immerse yourself in this, you will understand what it means to be an Anglican. And you will realize that it is far more united than what you can find and what you will find just in a purely intellectualized space, especially a kind of Gnostic space like the online world where there is no embodiment. It's words on a screen, 9 times out of 10, or a face on a screen. And so when you're trying to learn theology and learn the Anglican tradition through a screen, the embodiment is taken away. You're going to end up frustrated. You're going to end up confused. You're going to end up not seeing the tradition as clearly as you would like. And so my invitation to those who would like to understand Anglicanism, and I'm not saying there are not identity struggles within Anglicanism. Every church has identity struggles. Every church has people who think a little bit differently. But if you come and worship with us, you will see that there is a uniting center of Anglican worship rooted in the spirituality of the Book of Common Prayer and the pattern of worship it lays out for us that is both apostolic and also distinctly Anglican. And I pray that if you enter into this, you will come to love this tradition and see its beauty and depth in the same way that I have and continue to daily. Be blessed in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost. Amen.